Alright, so here is some more examples for using rules of exponents. So we're going to use the product rule for the first three examples. Again, because everything's being multiplied, we're going to use product rule. Again, to use product rule, we have to be using like bases. So again, with a situation like this, you can regroup all the factors that you're multiplying. So these -2 coefficients, I'm going to go ahead and write those next to each other that are being multiplied. I'm going to get everything with like bases. So the x's are going to be right next to each other. And the y's are going to be next to each other. There's only one y. Alright, so again, these are not exponents. These are just numbers. So -2 times -2 is 4. Again, we're multiplying the same base. The rule is you keep the base and you add the exponent. -1 plus 4 is 3. This is just the one y, so we got that going on just like that. Okay, so now so far we have 4x cubed y to the -1. Right? However, we talked about how you got to write your answer using only positive exponents. So again, when you have a negative exponent, what that does is it flips it into the reciprocal. So wherever it is, when you have a negative exponent, it's going to flip to the other side of the fraction bar. So since the 4 and the x cubed do not have negative exponents, it stays where it is. Y to the -1, because it has a negative exponent, it's going to flip to the bottom, and the exponent becomes positive. Next example. Alright, so again, we're multiplying. Coefficients, just the 4, that's all we got. Alright, the a's, I got a squared, a to the 4th. Next, I got the b's, b squared times b to the 4th. Alright, just the 4, stays the same, multiplying. Alright, you keep the base, you add the exponents. You're multiplying, keep the base, add the exponents. Since there are no negative exponents, nothing changes. This is your final answer. Alright, next, number 3, coefficients. Alright, x's got -4, x -3, x +2. Y's, I got y to the 4th, and y to the -3. Alright, so coefficients, just -2. The x's, again, since we're multiplying all three of those, you're going to keep the base, and you're going to add the exponents. -4 plus -3 is -7, plus 2 is -5. We added the exponents. That's the rule. Keep the base for the y. We add the exponents. 4 plus -3 is a +1. Alright, so now we have a negative exponent attached to the x. So when it comes to our final answer, the -2 and the y to the 1 stay up top. The x gets flipped to the bottom, and the exponent becomes positive. Next example, we are now going to talk about the product to a power rule, power to a power rule. We have an exponent outside a set of parentheses, so what we're going to do is we're going to distribute that, do everything inside the parentheses, again as an exponent. So that -4 gets a -1 exponent. That x to -1 gets a -1 exponent. And that y cubed gets a -1 exponent. We distributed that exponent through to the parentheses. Everything inside the parentheses gets that -1 as an exponent. Okay, so I'm going to leave this -4 with that -1 exponent as is for right now. But here where we're going to use the power rule, we have power to a power, exponent to an exponent. The rule is you keep the base and you multiply the exponents. -1 times -1 is a +1. Okay, so again, I got that +1 by multiplying these exponents. Here I got power to a power. I'm going to keep the base, and I'm going to multiply the exponents. 3 times -1 is -3. All right, so we've used the power to a power rule. All right, so now we're going to look at our answer, and we see that we have a couple of these with a negative exponent. Okay, so we got to fix that. All right, but the one that doesn't have a negative exponent, the x, is going to stay where it is, up top on a fraction bar. The -4 gets put to the bottom, and the exponent becomes positive. The y gets flipped to the bottom, and the exponent becomes positive. Here we go. Number 5, power to a power. We have an exponent that we're going to distribute through the parentheses, so it's going to be 4 to the third power, and u to the -2 to the third power. We are distributing that 3 exponent. 4 to the third power, that is 64. Here we have power to a power. The rule is you keep the base and you multiply the exponents. -2 times 3 is a -6. Okay, so we have a negative exponent, okay, but this negative exponent is attached to only the u. All right, not to the 64 and the u, just to the u. So when we write our answer, that 64 does not get flipped to the bottom. It stays up top. The only thing that gets flipped is the u, because again the negative exponent is attached to the u, so that gets flipped into the reciprocal, and then the exponent becomes positive. Number 6, distribute the exponent. That 2 gets distributed. -3 squared is 9. Power to a power, you multiply. Power to a power, you multiply. Negative exponents. Okay, the 9 does not have a negative exponent, so it stays up top. The x does, so it gets flipped. Exponent becomes positive. The y has a negative exponent, so it gets flipped, and then the exponent becomes positive. All right, so we're going to finish off here with the quotient rule against quotient because we're doing some division. We see the fraction bar in these problems. All right, so again, just like what we did with the product rule, we're going to break this up so we can, see where we're going to use this quotient rule. All right, so here we got the coefficients. I'm going to go ahead and split that up. 2 over -4. I'm going to group that together. Then we group the x together, so I have x squared over x to the -2. And the y's, y squared over y to the 4. Okay, so we can kind of focus in on how we're going to use this quotient rule. All right, so 2 over -4. All right, that's just 2 over -4, right? Those aren't exponents. These are just numbers, so we're going to go reduce that to -1/2. All right, here's where we're going to use that quotient rule. Again, the quotient rule goes like this. All right. When you're dividing same base, you keep the base and you subtract the exponents. 2 minus -2 is +4. Right? That's how I got +4. I took 2 minus -2. Top minus the bottom exponents. Get to the y's, keep the base, subtract top minus bottom exponent. 2 minus 4. Is -2. Okay. Now we look at our answer. We have only one negative exponent, so we have a fraction bar. So this 1 over -2 stays as a fraction. This x to the 4th stays up top. But because this y has a negative exponent, it gets flipped to the bottom, and the exponent becomes positive. Number 8, breaking it up, coefficients, x's, y's. Now you notice that with the x and the y up in the numerator, I put 1 as an exponent. Again, if you do not see an exponent, it is a 1 to be assumed there. It's not 0, it's 1. Okay, so here we go. I want to keep this as 4/3. Cannot reduce that any further. X the first divided by x squared. Rule is you keep the variable, you keep the base. Top minus bottom exponent. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Keep the base. Subtract top minus bottom exponent. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Okay, so we have a couple negative exponents here, so we need to rewrite this. So get our fraction bar going. Here's our 4/3. Move it over a little bit here. Here's our 4/3. X has a negative exponent, so it gets flipped to the bottom. Y has a negative exponent, so it gets flipped to the bottom. All right, last example. All right, so the only thing that has common bases here are the b's. So right, this a to the third we know is going to be in the bottom. So let me just kind of look at the b's here, where we can use that rule. So again, the rule is for quotient rule. Keep the base. Top minus bottom exponent. Negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7. Okay. And so because that has a negative exponent, we know it's going to get flipped to the bottom. So let me go and write my answer here. So we already know that a to the third is not going anywhere. We didn't do anything with a to the third. It's in the bottom. It stays in the bottom. Now I'm going to put a 1 in the top because we always want to have something in the numerator. All right, so this b, because it has a negative exponent, is going to get flipped to the bottom, and the exponent is going to be positive. Okay. All right, so hopefully that helped you with the homework from yesterday. Okay, if you have any other questions, please let me know. Have a great day.